2,000 years ago, a Jewish rabbi named Yeshua traveled around Palestine, teaching about the kingdom of heaven and performing miracles. After 3 years, he was crucified outside Jerusalem, then rose from the dead 3 days later and changed the course of human history. His followers recognize him as the long-promised Messiah, the Son of God. Perhaps you know him by the English translation of his name, Jesus. In the Old Testament book of Leviticus, God commanded the Jews to observe 7 specific feasts. While each of the feasts commemorates a specific event from the Jews' past, the Messiah is also foreshadowed in each one. Learning more about these Jewish feasts can enrich our understanding of and appreciation for our Messiah and his Jewish heritage. Today we'll take a look at Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. The Jewish High Holy Days begin on Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, and continue for 10 days, known as the Days of Awe, or Yamin Norim. On the 10th day, Yom Kippur begins. It is the most solemn and holy day for the Jewish people. Over the past 10 days, the people have reflected on their sins and shortcomings of the past year. Now they are ready for a day to reflect on what will atone or cover their sins. It is a day to be reconciled with God and humankind. The time from Rosh Hashanah through Yom Kippur is so sacred that many otherwise secular Jews will attend services at their synagogue during the High Holy Days. Yom Kippur always occurs on the 10th day of Tishri on the Jewish calendar. My earlier video about Rosh Hashanah contains details about the Jewish lunar calendar if you are interested in those particulars. I won't go into that information again here. The month of Tishri always occurs in the fall of the year in the northern hemisphere, typically in late September or early October. Now let's take a look at Leviticus 23, verses 26 through 32. This is the Mosaic law regarding the observance of the Day of Atonement. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Now the 10th day of this 7th month is the Day of Atonement. It shall be a holy convocation for you. You shall deny yourselves and present the Lord's offering by fire, and you shall do no work during that entire day, for it is a day of atonement, to make atonement on your behalf before the Lord your God. For anyone who does not practice self-denial during that entire day shall be cut off from the people. And anyone who does any work during that entire day, such as a one I will destroy from the midst of the people. You shall do no work. It is a statute forever throughout your generations in all your settlements. It shall be to you a Sabbath of complete rest, and you shall deny yourselves on the 9th day of the month at evening. From evening to evening you shall keep your Sabbath." 2 things are evident in this passage. The Jews were commanded to refrain from work on the Day of Atonement. It was, in effect, a Sabbath or a day of rest for them, and they are to deny themselves on that day. Some translations say afflict themselves. This means that they would practice self-denial or fast on the Day of Atonement. By afflicting their souls, they are asking for atonement for their sins. Jews today still observe Yom Kippur with prayer and fasting. During the temple period, the high priest would enter the most holy place in the temple, or the Holy of Holies, to offer atonement for his sins and the sins of the people. This was the only day a human would enter the Holy of Holies, and it was always only entered by the high priest. In addition to the animal sacrifice, the high priest would also lay his hands on a goat, the scapegoat, to transfer the people's sins to the goat. Then the goat would be driven out into the wilderness, removing the people's sins. The details prescribing the sacrifice and the scapegoat are outlined in Leviticus chapter 16. After the temple was destroyed in 70 AD, the sacrificial system ceased, as the temple was the only place where sacrifices could be offered. At that time, the rabbis declared that prayer alone was sufficient for the forgiveness of sins. Many Jewish people today also substitute good works and charitable donations along with prayer in the hope of atoning for their sins. Of course, Christians today see Christ's death on the cross as our atonement for sin. Let's explore a little about how Yom Kippur is observed today. Jews still refrain from work, and fasting is still an important part of its observance. Remember that the day begins at sundown, so before Yom Kippur begins, most Jews will enjoy a large meal. After all, it will be another 25 hours before they eat food or drink water. Practicing this self-denial is a way to connect spiritually with God. But everyone is allowed or expected to fast on Yom Kippur. Young children are not permitted to fast. At the age of 9, they are allowed to practice some elements of fasting, but complete fasting from food is not allowed until after the child's bar or bat mitzvah. Others who are permitted to refrain from fasting include pregnant women and nursing mothers, and individuals whose age or health would be endangered by withholding food and water. But the fast also includes abstinence from other things. For example, Jews do not wear leather on Yom Kippur, as leather in ancient times was a show of luxury. There is no bathing during this 25-hour period. Women may also abstain from wearing makeup on this day, and the use of lotions or fragrances is also avoided by everyone. Most all attending services will wear white as a show of purity and spiritual cleanliness, and some will wear a kittel, a garment typically worn only on one's wedding day or as a burial shroud. In other words, anything showy is given up, and couples refrain from marital relations on Yom Kippur. Many Jewish people spend most of the day in prayer services at the synagogue on Yom Kippur. That is because there are 5 prayer services spread out over the 25-hour period. 25 hours instead of 24 to put a hedge around the day so that it is properly observed. Before Yom Kippur officially begins, there is a special recitation called Kol Nidrei, which is Aramaic for all vows. This recitation, often set to music, occurs just before the first evening service begins and was added to the liturgy in the early Middle Ages. At that time, many Jewish people had been forced to convert to either Christianity or Islam to escape death. The Kol Nidrei liturgy is not so much a prayer as a legal contract that is read or chanted, originally intended to allow those converts to return to Judaism after being forced to convert to another religion. The Kol Nidrei basically nullifies all vows previously made against Yahweh. It is held before sunset, the beginning of Yom Kippur, and the service is chanted 3 times so latecomers might participate. I will include a link in the comments to this YouTube video of the Kol Nidrei sung by Cantor Angela Buchdahl, now senior rabbi of Central Synagogue in New York City. It is a hauntingly beautiful piece, and I encourage you to listen to it. During the afternoon service, the book of Jonah is read to remind the people of God's forgiveness and mercy. At the end of the evening service, the shofar, or ram's horn, is blown. The shofar was blown 100 times on Rosh Hashanah, as a call to repentance and to herald the coming of God as King of the universe. Now it is blown at the close of Yom Kippur to summon the spiritual awakening for the Jewish people. And after a day of fasting, immediately following the evening service, the fast is broken. Different communities around the world break the fast in different ways. Some have a nice family dinner complete with meat. Others will order pizza. Still others break the fast with bagels and a cold platter. But where do we find Jesus, the Messiah, in the Day of Atonement? As I mentioned earlier, the Holy of Holies was only entered once each year on the Day of Atonement and only by the high priest. But we are told in the Gospels that when Jesus died on the cross, the thick veil that separated the Holy of Holies from the rest of the temple was ripped in two from top to bottom. Let's look at two passages, one from Luke and one from Matthew. It was now about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m, while the sun's light failed, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Then Jesus, crying with a loud voice, said, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." Having said this, he breathed his last. And from Matthew chapter 27, "Then Jesus cried again with a loud voice and breathed his last. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, and the rocks were split." Picture this. Jesus is on the cross, dying a horrible death. And from high noon until 3 p.m, darkness descends upon Jerusalem. It is as if God himself is turning his back on the world. And while this strange phenomena is occurring, the curtain that separates the Holy of Holies from the other parts of the temple, that curtain that has only been opened once per year on the Day of Atonement, is suddenly ripped in half. Not only that, the rip begins at the top and comes down to the floor. And this happens at precisely the moment that Jesus breathes his last breath, surrendering his spirit to God. In that moment, Christ became our atonement once and for all. No longer was the blood of goats and calves required to atone for sin. Jesus' lifeblood was sufficient. The veil dividing God and humankind was no longer needed. So believers in Jesus accept that his sacrifice on the cross as the final atonement for sin. Yom Kippur foreshadows the Messiah's atoning sacrifice for all. I hope you have enjoyed learning a little bit about Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, and how Jesus' death on the cross on Good Friday became the Day of Atonement for Christians. If you'd like to learn more about Yom Kippur and other roots of Judaism, let me recommend to you the book Sitting at the Feet of Rabbi Jesus by Anne Spangler and Lois Tverberg. Much of the information I have shared in this video comes from their book. I highly commend it to you for your further study. And another resource is a pamphlet titled Feast of the Bible, published by Rose Publishing. Thanks for listening.